And welcome everybody to Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. It is the last episode of season 7 of Dive Cuts. I am your host, Sam Snelling. We're here to talk all things Mizzou basketball. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure that you are subscribed. You can hit the subscribe button. You can like the post that helps spread the word. Hopefully we can get into some more algos and get in front of as many Mizzou basketball fans as we can. If you're listening on the podcast, hello, just hearing voices. And so the next voice that you will hear is my co-host, Matt Harris, who's here to join us tonight. Matt, how are you?
Well, sir, it's been since about 7 days since I last saw you. It's been far too long. I know every day that's gone by, a little piece of you has been like, man, I miss seeing that guy. I miss being around that guy.
Yeah.
But now we have to go back to our usual one box, you on my left, and then my ugly mug on the right. Yeah.
This is our segmented life.
Yeah.
A week ago, so we're recording this on Thursday, August 1st. Mizzou football camp is heating up, as I'm sure a lot of people have been tuned in to before the box score. But yeah, a week ago, you and myself and Mr. Matt Watkins trekked down to Columbia, your old stomping grounds. You are the homebody there, a Cupie by nature, and so I think you had the benefit of actually getting to see a couple practices. But we all took in one practice, and so I thought, it'd probably be a good idea. I know many of you are Rock M Plus subscribers. If you are, you have already read Matt's takeaways, most likely, and Mr. Watkins' takeaways. But for the podcast audience, I figure it'd be good to kind of go over that. And I really haven't really said much about it other than that we went and I made you guys take a picture, which you both tried to hide your face.
Incognito. That's as I'm on a podcast with my face.
Yeah, just dipping out, and Watkins is ducking as well. And there was a nice little blurry background image of I think it's just me and Watkins. You can see of my thigh behind I think Marquez Warwick was blocking out Tony Perkins. So if you go to the Mizzou Hoop Store, you can actually see a navy blue with gray shorts, white shoes. Well, here I can do we're on
because the people want to see your blurry white thigh.
It's a
that's why the people come here, to see Sam as a vague background component for the social media account.
There it is in the yellow box. Proof that we were there. This is the post from the Rock M Plus forums. I think it's funny. Okay, it's funny.
It's fine. We have different definitions of what's comical, but
it's funny.
Run with what you want to do there.
We're celebrities.
That's even
all the way to the Mizzou Hoops Twitter account. In very blurry, completely undefinable. But yeah, that was us. So let's talk about this because we did get to see, so we could start with kind of like what we both saw, which was the first practice. They're still doing a lot of fundamentals. And I think one of the things that, at least for me, kind of going into this, you're getting out your notebook.
Yeah, principally, I still have the. That's a problem. I thought I still had them.
Oh, the practice plan.
Yeah.
So it is really nice when you show up. They basically, I'm sure they're used to having all kinds of visitors, both press. I know there were some coaches who were there, kind of taking in the practice from other smaller colleges. Some family members were there. The legend Mike Kelly stopped in. You saw Brad Luce, who apparently was scouting rescouting the grounds for
Yeah.
his soon-to-be job move back to Columbia.
Yep.
But yeah, so they have a practice plan laid out for everybody. They have a roster with a picture of everybody's, of everybody on the roster, so you know who you're looking at for people that are maybe less familiar with the players. I don't think either of us needed that, but it is nice to have it there. And then the practice plan, it tells you what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They basically started out with a perfect passing drill, which I actually kind of like. The drill is basically it's a 4-out motion drill of which you're moving, you're working on, giving your, leading the catcher. The catcher is giving a target. You're working on getting the ball on the outside. So basically, just trying to make sure that you're going to hit. I believe it was 10 clean passes, and before which you would think guys at the college level would be able to ace that with no problem. And I'm sure once they get to maybe November, it's going to look a lot better than it does now. But it was some rough stretches.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is, players today are probably individually more skilled than they've ever been. I think they've got access to more trainers, access to more tape, access to more data than they've ever had. And so you'll see guys that arrive at college with just an immense amount of individual skill. But I think the biggest thing that sort of happens is, when guys get here, a lot of the team-based concepts sometimes I think are a little bit lacking. I think we saw perfect passing drills. We saw, something essentially close to a basic shell drill on defense. You see them working on communicating ball screen coverages and really basic ball screen coverages. We're not talking about like hyper technical ball screen coverages. We're talking about positioning when you're basically on the low side of help, like where guys need to be. I mean, we're talking about on offense, making sure that you're understanding when to go on a 45 cut, when there's a guy at the level of the ball versus playing below the level of the ball when you need to cut. And a lot of this stuff is things you would probably, I think most of us in some way, shape, or form, we're probably repping out by middle school, junior high most of the time. But I think sometimes, before you can really build in team concepts, you have to rep, the fundamentals that are going to go into the actions you're going to run, which are going to build the sets you're going to run. And in a lot of ways, these guys, they're 10 new players. There's not sort of that inherent continuity of playing together, that familiarity of, knowing what guys' preferences are, knowing how to play with certain guys. I think a lot of that, it seems rudimentary, but you have to start chemistry with really basic building blocks before you can build really, really in-depth and complex compounds. And so that's sort of, I think what was interesting is just to watch, how practice structure builds sequentially into something, and I think if you don't pay close attention, if you just walked anything to practice and watch them play basketball, you'd be like, oh my God, this looks terrible. But if you watch an entire practice, you sort of understand why things look a little rough at the end section. So I think just it's a good reminder that you need a baseline for where teams are. We're going to, most of us don't see this team until they show up in November probably, or at least maybe you see in a former life, maybe I got to see a team in October, but you'd miss the entire summer part. There's a really, 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 really immense value in seeing what you see, just going through basic, watching these guys try and sort things out. So I think that was probably my biggest takeaway. It was good to see guys struggle. It was good to see how they structure their teaching environment and how they try and sequentially order drills and reps to build on one another. And that, again, people are like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But to watch the staff and how they approach it is always good, because otherwise it's sort of speculative on our part. So I think it was just overall writ large in the two practices I saw, just watching teaching, watching how they structure, watching when Dennis Gates and when assistants step in to correct things is always interesting. I think you can disagree with me on what they are not one to let the drill play out and then stop and then come back and correct. They will stop a drill midway and very vocally correct.
Mhm.
Sometimes coaches will let a drill run through and, then, calmly outline what happens. They are very, very quick to stop drills, pull the cord, and do corrections. It's sort of nice to see their approach to teaching and how they want to do it. So we can get into more of the fun, wonky stuff if you want, but just I think what people need to understand is it's July. I think they've probably just gone live as a team for the first time in really structured settings for the first time. This summer has really been about chemistry, fundamentals, driving home basics, making sure you're playing clean, and doing some rudimentary install. And then when they come back in the fall, I think you're going to start to see kind of the finer points and the more technical and, wonkier schematic stuff get in. I think what we saw was really just kind of pouring a foundation at this point.
Yeah. And I also think like it was important. I even kind of noticed, something that I brought up to both you guys, like during the practice, having been, a coach before, you design a practice in a way, and I think this kind of extends your point about, walking in and seeing things in a bit of disarray. You design things in a way that stacks, right?
Yeah.
So you start with one thing and then you add another segment and then you add more and you add more. And that's one of the things that, like, even in this practice, the amount of things that they began with that they were applying later in the practice was significant. I mean,
yeah.
they did finish with this sort of 3-on-3 reps, but within that 3-on-3, they were working on. So I remember I just took a picture of the practice plan, so I have it right here. So basically, it went 2v1 shooting, rebounding after perfect passing drill. And they did defensive stations where you were talking about. They were working on ball screen coverages. They were doing weak side coverages. They were doing basically a ball side help drill, where it's basically working on communicating if you need help, you don't need help, and all that kind of stuff. And then from there they went another defensive drill. Then they did split cut shooting, where they were working on all kinds of different approaches to, like, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, basically it's basically their built-in options for when they run their base sets. Like a Missouri base set fundamentally is run early clock, big flashes to the high post, the elbow, entry play, and then you play off that. And you play off a split cut, which is ball screen away, and that cutter can either, pop or they can cut backdoor, but it's a split cut. And what Missouri does is it builds in probably a dozen options off that initial read. So when you watch Missouri and you say, are they running offense? Yes. The reason why it might look disorganized or why it doesn't look like a repetitive pattern is the only pattern that really sometimes exists is that elbow entry to a split cut, and then everything is reads off of that. And so Missouri basically went through its progression of reads and stacked actions off that read. It can be as simple as a down screen into, a guy coming off, and then it builds from there. So to your point,
for anybody that watches the NBA, like, this is like prime Golden State Warriors.
Miami Heat, Golden State Warriors,
like Draymond Green is your entry point, Steph Clay, all those guys kind of running split cut action.
Bam Adebayo in Miami runs some of it.
Yeah. So that there's the familiarity there. So they basically, they had about a dozen different options going on. They had, both sides working, and it was really kind of interesting to kind of watch them go through and how quickly they went through all the different progressions and kind of working on those things. Then they had some 45 cut shooting, which I thought was nice. They had Clyde shots,
corner drift, baby.
Yeah. You even kind of pointed out, like, they had something called Boston in there, and just like, hey. And then they went into the 3v3 rep reps where they were looking at starting with the high split cuts and then ending with the low split cuts. So again, like stacking drills, building up, and in a span of an hour and a half, they've gone from basic working on the basics of all these things to applying the basics of these things, and really doing so in a 3-on-3 way, which gives you a little bit more space, gives a little bit more reaction and read time, and then you can kind of drill that down as you add more bodies to the floor.
Yeah, big thing is too, this was probably I think they're only their second or third time going live running stuff, so needless to say, it looked a little rough. And the other thing is the guys who were playing at that elbow position were all bigs. Trent Burns, Peyton Marshall, Josh Gray. I would say that maybe Peyton Marshall's probably got the most extensive experience. And even that was just learning how to do it last year at OTE. And this is why watching practices are great, because Missouri's top 3 base options are the same base reads that Peyton had to make while at OTE. Point blank, exact same. You can look at what OTE ran and then what Missouri ran. Why? Because Missouri called up OTE and said, these are our base set reads.
Yeah.
Now imagine you're a college freshman and you've got 9 more on top of that. You've gone from 3 to 12. It's your first time repping it, and you've got Josh Gray just absolutely crowding your airspace.
He's a big
He's
guy.
an immense person.
Yeah, I want to say what is Peyton's probably he's probably down to like 280 now.
Yeah, he's looking he's getting smaller every time I see him.
And Josh is like a rock solid 260, 270.
Yeah, they're not going to have problems defending traditional 5s this year. But point is, you're watching a freshman. He's the most extensive guy doing it. He's got 4 times the reads. He's running it for the second time live, even in 3v3 versus a guy who's 24 years old. It's not going to look great. But, that's really great for us to see, because you can begin to go, okay, this is where they're starting from. And if Peyton looks great on opening night, you're going to be like, all right, that kid made some progress. But if he's looking like he's a little slow, or, the uptake isn't coming as quick as you want, you can go, all right, we understand why. Josh Gray has never really been asked to act as a reader or connector at any program he's played at. Trent Burns is probably more of a perimeter, face-up style big, but he's never been asked to be a connector or a reader. Now, Mark Mitchell will eventually probably spend a lot of time at the elbow, but you know what? Mark's played a lot in that position at Duke, or he's played more, and he's got more college reps at that position than any of these 3 bigs. So you hold Mark out, and you let your bigs rep it. So it's just really good to see that kind of stuff. See, okay, Missouri's putting a premium on letting its legitimate 5s get early reps doing this, and then it will eventually integrate Mark Mitchell later in doing that. So that was really, really great to see.
That is worth pointing out. The first practice that Mark was
had
not
a family thing.
Yeah, was not there. He was there for the practice you were there for.
Yep.
They had just gotten Tony Perkins back from a little bit of an illness. They weren't sure if he was going to go. He ended up going. Aiden Shaw, I know people had kind of pointed out that he had been missing from some social media. We had some questions of whether or not he was kind of still with the team. He was still with the team. He had hurt his wrist earlier in the year. I think they had some what they do, the caravan thing. I can't remember what they call it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the Mizzou caravan, whatever. Where they go around all the different towns, and Aiden very clearly had something on his wrist there.
Yeah.
That is off. He is back and participating, not fully though.
Yeah, he didn't go in live scrimmages on Saturday.
They held him out. They held him out in those.
Yep. So I think the biggest thing I would tell people is everybody looks the size that they're listed as, which sometimes that is in doubt until you see them up close. Everyone on the hoof looks basically as listed. And I think the biggest thing the one thing I took away is sometimes you see or we watch a ton of these guys film, we look at all their data and you wonder, all right, but is that what the version of them we're going to see when they get to Mizzou? And for a lot of these guys, the biggest facets of their game have carried over and translated. So I think that's always heartening to see, okay, they're not trying to fundamentally change or alter what someone is. Like, I think the biggest thing you could say, like in, Josh Gray's cases, he's shooting trail threes. That's what Missouri's going to do sometimes. And he's playing more aggressively in pick and roll coverages. But fundamentally, Josh Gray's job is still wall up in the paint, crash the glass, and absolutely flush anything that's around the rim. It's what he did at South Carolina. It's what he did here. What's changed is he's probably going to infuriate some people because there's going to be an occasional trail three. And he's absolutely going to play on the line, up the line, being aggressive pick and roll coverages.
I think he has the mobility to do
does.
that too. Like he's a really good athlete. His nickname is the Horse. He is very horse-like. He's a big, strong guy. So I don't know how I feel about a lot of trail threes from him. But I
made
certainly
2 in scrimmages on Saturday, banged in 2 of them.
Hey, any shot that goes in is always a good shot, right?
2 of 5 on trail threes, baby.
40% would be something.
On low volume, but
well, and that is one of the things. Like, I was impressed. I thought like Trent Burns was farther along than I sort of expected him to be.
Yeah.
I thought he looked pretty good. I think I think Peyton Marshall, by the time he's done at Mizzou, hopefully sticks around for a while. Yeah, like I like his, I like his shooting pocket. I like how his release. He's got a little bit of a the offhand on top of the ball, but I mean, like the release looks good. Yeah, like there's nothing to complain about the way it comes off his hand.
It's soft too. Hits soft, doesn't.
Yeah,
good 2-3 rotations, hits soft off the rim. It's not a bad looking jumper. It just needs to be consistent. But yeah, I thought coming out of that, it looked rough, but if you were to step back and say, okay, an hour ago they hadn't repped this, they were picking it up. I think it was just timing in some cases on reads, not the improper read. Probably the timing of a lot of reads seemed off, but they haven't gone live very much yet. So I think that's going to get fixed. But again, really, really good to see just sort of teaching, good to see terminology, good to see guys sort of match what they're listed as and sort of what the tape tells us they were at other places. So it wasn't a bad place just to get a baseline gauge of what this roster looks like.
And I always think it's fun, like as a tall person, I'm a little bit under 6'6", to show up and to see guys, who are listed at 6'8", and yeah, they're 6'8". Like Aiden walked over. So like the professionalism around the program is terrific. The number of players who came over and introduced themselves. I'm sure Coach Gates has kind of drilled a lot of this, but pretty much everybody came over, shakes hands and introduces themselves, and standing up next to Aiden, you're like, yep, you're 6'8". Make me look small. So yep. It's always kind of fun to see guys in person and up close.
Yep.
The other I did kind of want to touch on a few takeaways and like kind of what your impressions were. Again, like if you're a subscriber, you probably read some of this already. I thought, I was happy to see Trent Pierce, a little sloppy with the ball at times, but overall I thought he had a good practice, at least in the first one. I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see Mark Mitchell because I wanted to see how guys looked against Mark. I think we know what we're getting in Mark. And certainly Jacob Cruz is a guy who he gets his feet set. That ball's very likely to be going in.
Yep. If he gets on balance, I think I told you before watching him, the ability he has to get out of handoffs, to, turn out of pin downs, just to get on balance is impressive. I think, a lot of us are looking at, or sort of what happens from the shot pocket up. But just being on balance, being square, being consistent with that is really, really tough. And that guy, I think, what were they doing? They're doing 2v1 shooting, and he's got to relocate to the corner. You got to get feet down, and you've got to get square. That guy can get it done. Like, I think that just the remarkable consistency there. When he misses, it's sometimes because he's got to speed up the shot motion against a closeout. But man, he gets on balance just about any way you want.
Yeah.
The question's going to be, how can he get to that in the flow of a set? But man, in drills and even what we heard, just from playing pickup, that guy can get buckets and he can get going in a pretty, get going lickety split. So that was good to see. Saturday, Mark Mitchell was back in the scrimmages I saw, but I think the one thing that I was probably more intrigued to see was just what they've been doing with his shooting form. And before practice on Saturday, he and Kyle Smith-Peters were on a side basket working on things. And a lot of it was just from catching the shot pocket to getting here and getting there straight up and down, getting there efficiently. Because I think I think when Mark committed and you looked at the tape, a lot of it, his shot pocket was probably low down around his waist.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would be smooth up, but then there'd be a hitch near the top for the release. So his shot pocket's been elevated probably to mid sternum, which you want to see. That's going to allow him to be a little bit quicker up top. The guide hand still moves a little bit, but it's not on top there. But the bigger deal to me is there's no hitch, once he gets to the top of that release point. Looks like they've lowered the release point a little bit. It was above his head a little bit at Duke. Now it's closer to eyebrow level. So it hasn't been overhauled. Like the elbow still out a little bit. The guide hand still over the top a bit. But the big stuff, getting the shot pocket up, getting the release point a little lower, that's happened. Weirdly, near the back end too, this is probably hyper wonky. The ball comes off probably not his index finger and his middle finger, but it comes off more the middle finger and his ring finger. So it's kind of creating a little bit of a knuckle. It doesn't come off really with sometimes clean rotation, but when he gets it off those two fingers and they get pointed down, it's a pretty good looking jumper and it's a little softer. You can tell they're still repping it and still fixing it. It's not something that you're really seeing run at live fire reps. It's still like, hey, let's get on a side basket and work from catch up. But they're putting in work. It looks a little more fluid and a little more cleaner. Looks like closer to his freshman year than his sophomore year. So I was really, really intrigued to see that. In scrimmages, that guy's putting the ball on the deck and attacking closeouts.
Yeah.
He's ripping through and driving and playing at the rim. They have him playing more on the wing right now. I imagine once the bigs, like I said earlier, get a little more comfortable and settled, playing in that boss position at the elbow, we'll see Mark get to that spot and play there and, become a guy who can facilitate an attack from that spot. But right now it looks like they're trying to get him comfortable, and being assertive on the wing and getting the bigs able to play at that spot. Defensively, he's everything you wanted. Like, didn't matter who he had. He can handle switches. He communicates. Gets picked out and, corrected a little bit for help side positioning defense, and he can drift a little bit towards the midline. That's still somewhat of a thing for this group is, help side positioning can be better, but on the ball, switching, just he's everything you wanted.
Yeah.
No, it's that's the thing. If he can do that, what he did at Duke for 2 years, outstanding. Like in practice, whoever he tracked, whoever he switched to, had no problem handling the aggressive coverages, communicates, off ball in good position most of the time. Just absolutely what you got what you were purchasing there.
Yeah.
And it's been consistent. So that was good to see.
I do want to touch on, we talked a little bit about the freshman bigs, saying Burns looks like he's a little bit farther ahead than we expected.
Mm-hmm.
Marshall, I think, looks good, but I was really pretty impressed with Barrett, Tio Barrett. He looks bigger. Like, I mean, to me, like, I don't know. I can't remember what they had him listed as, maybe 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah.
I was worried kind of, watching some film of him the last couple of years that was inflated.
No.
And it's not. He is like, he's got legitimate size. I realize he's got a lot of hair on top of his head. So it does make him look a little taller, but no, his body is sort of caught up with that. And he's well built, looks really good. Anna Batang wasn't fully integrated. I think he was kind of nursing a little bit of I think they said it was a minor knee issue, just sort of being careful.
Yeah.
The staff is always very careful with injuries, so it kind of makes sense that even if it's just a tweak, you just sort of hold him out. But both him and Allen, they
send him over to Eli.
They do not look like they don't look like freshmen. Marcus Allen, he does look like he should be like a defensive end. Like he is big. He's got long arms. He got great bounce off the floor.
Yeah.
I don't know where he's going to fit rotationally this year, but if they can get if they can get that guy to stick around and develop, man, like he is an impressive looking player.
I think that's when you watch the scrimmage. When I watch them scrimmage, I think the biggest difference is they look like an SEC basketball team. Every position, I think Marcus Allen and I think Honor Batang are both +4, +5 wingspan guys. We know Aiden's really long. We know Mark Mitchell's long. They've got bigs that can hold ground, and can, actually defend at the 5, but there's still some mobility. I think the one thing that jumps out at you, even before you talk about scheme, even before you talk about how guys looked with individual skills, is when they're getting up and down the floor, they look bigger, they look longer, they look more athletic. I think the biggest difference, and the one thing we've heard consistently, is just Tony Perkins, I think, pretty much embodies the difference you're going to see here. That guy does not waste a dribble. If he's putting the ball on the deck, it's
he's
straight
going somewhere with it.
It's going, and he's not avoiding contact. That guy's looking to put his shoulder through you. Like, you see Tony up close, and he is well built, but you don't think, oh man, this guy's like, all that interested in contact. His functional strength is nuts. If you crowd him, if you try and turn him, it's pain for Ant to try and turn him. He eventually gave up on that effort. And if he gets moving in transition and you do anything to try and build a wall or get in front of him, it doesn't matter. He's going to play through contact there. I think the one thing is, even some of the freshmen like Marcus Allen aren't afraid to play through some contact. I think they had refs in for 3 of these scrimmages, and guys were getting used to having an SEC reffing crew going around and figuring out what really counts as a foul. There were a lot of guys with hands up wondering why fouls weren't getting called, but physically this team, I think, is going to be built to take a little bit more contact, and they're going to be able to, I think, dish it out a bit more. And it's going to make a big difference, I think, particularly on the defensive end of the floor. It's really hard to bump Tony Perkins off a ball screen. It's really hard to bump T.O. off a ball screen. Ant, I don't think, is packed on weight, but Ant looks a little bit more filled out through the chest and the shoulders. He was harder to knock off ball screens this year. They've got guys, I think, on the wing who are going to be able to really play on the line, up the line, and use that length to make it tough. So offensively, guys had stretches where they looked really good, and, guys did some good things. But I think, again, it's one data point in late July. But physically and athletically, they look farther along than they were last year. And I think even the last point I'll make is, we'd sort of talked amongst ourselves about, what are you going to do with Jacob Cruz or Caleb Grill? Cruz is a bigger body and, longer and can maybe shoot it a bit more. One of the most consistent rebounders I saw in scrimmages was Caleb Grill. That guy, if it's a 50-50 ball or it's an outside of his area, he's going to go get it. And he still has the ability to create shooting gravity as a spacer. Really, really vocal, understands what they want to do in defensive coverages. I walked away thinking, okay, yeah, Cruz can bring some shooting and some size at that position, but Grill still does all the things that I think you want a veteran guard to do. He can defend within the team concept. He yanked down, I think, 8 rebounds in a 10-minute scrimmage, banged in 3 threes, jumped a passing lane to create a deflection that led to a run out. Like, no one's going to walk away from that scrimmage going, oh my God, Caleb Grill 8 people alive. But all the things that you want to see that fill in the margins for good winning basketball, that guy gives it to you. So that was the big thing that jumped out at me is guy just makes winning plays and, adds value in that way. So that was good to see as well, that is still there and there's still sort of that tenacity around.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I think, what I saw and I did, I think probably have a little bit of question on how they were going to apply Grill, with so much roster turnover, but it is one of those things that you kind of remember, like as he was sort of getting more comfortable last year, Mizzou was suddenly looking like a much better team, and then he got hurt and things went to crap. So we are going to talk about some other recruiting stuff, but first we're going to have a word from our sponsors, and this is going to seem weird because our sponsor in this case is Dan Keegan. It's not really a sponsor. I'm going to play a video from Dan because we're about to release this Rock M Plus preview magazine, and I'm excited about it. I know Matt Harris is thrilled. He's the biggest football fan in the world. But here's Dan Keegan to tell you all about it.
Dear Rock M Plus listeners, readers, and subscribers, we are thrilled to announce our first ever digital Mizzou football preview magazine. Inspired by the iconic newsstand staples like Athlon, Phil Steele, and Street and Smith, our team has created a PDF jam-packed full of content for you to learn up about the most anticipated Missouri football season maybe in history. Checking in at about 100 pages, we have in-depth previews of all 12 opponents, analysis of each position group, profiles of transfers, recruits, exclusive photographs, and features like a retrospective on the 2014 Tigers, the evolution of Faurot Field, Luther Burden's place in Mizzou history. There's college football preview content, an analytics Q&A with Bill Connolly of ESPN, just so much more. This digital magazine will be available for download very, very soon. Please pay attention to our socials and our channels. It will be $15 for purchase, but we'll have discounts available for premium Rock M Plus subscribers based on your membership tier. $10 for monthly subscribers, $5 if you're an annual subscriber. It's no better time to become a member, so secure your discount on this one-of-a-kind product today. We know that you're going to love this magazine. We cannot wait to have it on your devices. MIZ.
How about that?
Dan did better than I would have done. I would have just said 100 pages. Here's the price. You know what to do. Get out. So kudos to Dan for getting through that. I would have failed miserably.
Yeah, I kind of thought it'd be interesting to have our own little ad for it. I appreciate, Dan kind of throwing that together last minute. We're going to keep kind of running those and all these podcasts until we release. And then after we release, he's going to tell you about, it being available. I put in the forums today that let me retry to speak properly here. We originally were hoping to have it out by the 1st. It is now the 1st. We don't have it out. I'm just gonna, be honest with everybody. Like, we're all trying really hard. It is a big task, and it's something that we are learning a lot about. Levi right now is in like the final stages of putting everything together. He's been handling the design. He's handed over like 37 pages right now, and it looks fantastic. I'm stoked about it. So I want him to finish it soon, just so we can kind of get it in everybody's hands. But it's a big thing. There's a lot of words. And if you're into Mizzou football, if you're listening to this podcast, there's probably a small chance that you at least also like Mizzou football. I think that you're really going to like it, and it's cheap too. So check it out when it's coming out. Recruiting. We had some good news just the other day. Was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. One of the top targets of the 2025 class. I think there was something kind of circling that Mizzou didn't make like whatever the top 5 was or something like that, or top 6. They were kind of left off a graphic along the way, and it didn't matter because they've got an official visit coming for 5-star prospect Jalen Harrelson.
Yeah, there's been a lot of legwork. Jalen has said in various forms that Missouri's probably been the school that's had the strongest presence at La Lumiere Academy, his private school that he goes to kind of in north central Indiana. Harrelson's also an Indianapolis area native from Fishers, which is just northeast of my location here. So it's been a recruitment where Missouri's had to get a lot of face time in because top 10 prospects in the state of Indiana have a lot of options, Sam, close to home. I don't know if you know. There's a school in Bloomington. There's a school in West Lafayette that's pretty good. There's, a school here in Indianapolis, kind of in central Indy, that has been to a couple Final Fours in the last 15 years. Just a lot of solid options. Oh, and then all the other Big Ten schools.
I like you getting Butler in there for the misses.
More Final Fours in the last 25 years than
Missouri. Well, and IU.
And
That's
Purdue.
true. Yeah.
No one's coming at them. Butler's, Purdue and IU combined have the same number of Final Fours as Butler. That's what she reminded me of today, when she saw Gordon Hayward retired. So it's a real deep pool of schools within the halo of where Jalen's from. Michigan State, has a pretty steady presence in getting into this state as well. And the question was, would Jalen sort of expand the list? His initial 3 visits that he was going to take are Indiana, Notre Dame, and Michigan State. The question was, would Purdue get a visit? Would Mizzou get a visit? And would KU get a visit? Turns out all 3 will now get visits. They'll come probably in late September through October, but that's sort of a good sign that this recruitment's not going to wrap down really quickly. I think the thought process had been, we'll see if he can get other visits scheduled, but maybe that's just the top 3. Maybe that's where he cuts it off and it's over with. Duke and Auburn were in this thing early on. They've sort of drifted from the pack. Gonzaga was in the mix here, but that's far away from the home region. And Gonzaga started looking at wings on the West Coast. But this is big for Missouri. They're going to get him on campus for the Vanderbilt game on September 21st. And we'll see what happens from there. Again, this is a deep pool. Lots of great options for him. But half the battle is just getting these guys on campus and being able to pitch them, being able to show your infrastructure and your culture. We'll see what Missouri can do and building off that. But this is a kid that, it sounds obviously a top 10 prospect's really good, but I think he's probably the favorite guy I've watched on the grassroots circuit this spring. Just can play easily, can flex between all 3 guard spots. In a pinch, you can use him at the 4 in small ball lineups. Has better feel than you'd think as a pick and roll operator. Absolutely dominant at times in transition. Jumper's coming along, but he still shot 31% from the NBA line this spring. Plays the game the right way. Plays hard, gets on the glass, does good work in team defense. I don't know if Missouri's had a wing that I would say is as well-rounded as this guy will be when he shows up. I think he can make a difference, within a half-court set and, take on different roles there and, find a niche pretty early on if he were to come to Columbia. So that's a big deal to get him on campus, and we'll see, where it goes from there. But obviously positive news yesterday that came out.
Yeah, and it's a deep class at the top too. I mean,
It is.
You got guys that I think a lot of NBA teams would take, right now. AJ Devonsa's at the top, Cameron Boozer.
Mm-hmm.
I love watching Boozer. Just a really, really fun player. Just looking at the top 247, Darren Peterson's on there. Acuff. Cal got on board.
That guy
with
can get a
Acuff.
bucket. He's an athletic and aggressive guy, plays with a ton of confidence, and that guy can get you a bucket. He's a Cal point guard.
Yeah, I was gonna say that he will remind you a lot of Calipari point guards. Koa Pete, Caleb Wilson, Nate Ament, Mikael Brown, Malik Thomas, Isaiah Harwell, Braden Burries. I've not seen Burries at all.
Burries is a fun point guard.
Jasper Johnson, and then Jalen Harrelson is at 13. So,
yep.
I mean, I've seen only some film of Harrelson. I've seen some of Johnson. You're gonna give me either of those guys, I'm gonna take Harrelson pretty much every time.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Johnson's a talented guy. I even thought when Missouri was recruiting him, he felt to me more like a luxury. Like if you can get him, great. But if not, like I'm not gonna be upset about it.
Yeah.
If they can stay in it with Harrelson and give them a fighting chance, like I would be legitimately disappointed. If it gets down and like they just can't quite close the deal, like I'll be disappointed.
Yeah.
I still think it's the same thing. It's like it's one of those. It's a luxury, and I don't think they need a wing. But as a guy who I like watching, and I think I agree with you on this, I would be disappointed if they didn't get him.
I think the way that I would sort of also frame Harrelson's recruitment is Missouri loaded up the last 3 cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri doesn't need to take a big class right now. They had Aaron Rowe that they got in the boat in late December. I think there's supreme confidence that in time they're going to get Nick Randall on board. And, I think most fans say, okay, then you're going to go for a third guy, right? And I would say, I don't think you need to take a third guy just to take a third guy.
Right.
If they take 2 in this class, they'll have 11 high school recruits they've taken since 2022. That's about 2 or 3 per class. It's pretty good. If you look at the positional breakdown, it's pretty even amongst ball handler, wings, and bigs. And a lot of those guys, I think only 2 of them are top 50 level prospects when they came out of high school. One's Rowe, the other one is Boateng. So what I'm getting at is Missouri basically has taken 8 developmental / multi-year recruits in Dennis's time here. It's half the roster.
Right.
They've done a good job at getting high school talent in the door that could be multi-year guys. What they haven't quite landed is a Jasper Johnson or a Jalen Harrelson or a Jaden Quaintance, a top 15 guy who, if circumstances break right, is going to be a potential one and done guy. I don't think Jalen Harrelson right now is a one and done guy. Sitting here right now in early August of 2024, I don't know if he's going to be at that level. But if he plays well as a freshman, he could play himself into being a one and done guy. Missouri, I don't think, has landed that kind of player under Dennis Gates yet. And that's what Jalen Harrelson would be. Honor Batang, if Honor Batang's jumper was a little bit more consistent, I thought could be that type of player who could really surprise and jump up boards. I'm not sure if the jumper is going to be there or not, but Jalen has all the tools, has the positional size, shoots a little bit more consistently right now. That if you got him is a difference maker. And that's a guy that you reach for and you expand your class for. Because the other thing I think is you have to consider the alternative here is what can you go get from the portal? Like if the question here is not what's one freshman versus another freshman, it's what's this freshman going to be versus what I can go get in the portal. Of developmental freshmen right now, at the wing spot, which is what Harrelson nominally is probably not what you need. Honor Batang is right now conservatively a multi-year guy. Hyper talented, but a multi-year guy. Marcus Allen, multi-year guy. Trent Burns, who's at that 3-4 spot, multi-year guy. You've already got a lot of those guys.
Trent Pierce, you mean?
Trent Pierce, yeah. Sorry, I mixed up my Trents.
There's 2 Trents.
Great. But you get my drift, which is they've got 3 multi-year kind of wings.
Yeah.
They went and they got a proven producer this year in Jacob Cruz who can shoot the heck out of basketball. If you need a specialist who can come in and give you X, Y, and Z in their toolkit, you can find those kinds of wings in the portal. Jalen Harrelson is a guy who can come in, even if you have him for 1 or 2 years, is going to be by a year or two better than a portal guy. And even as a freshman could probably be a key guy in your rotation. So if the choice is Jalen Harrelson or standing pat with your 3 developmental guys and then finding a specialist in the spring, I think that those are the 2 avenues you look at.
Yeah.
I don't think you go around and you don't look, and this is going to sound crazy given where recruiting was a couple of years ago. Consider this. The median recruit for Dennis Gates out of the high school ranks has been 95th in the composite. He hasn't taken a kid so far that's been lower than 150th. Under Consul Martin, even if you factor in the Porters and Jeremiah Tillman, the median high school recruit for Consul Martin was 193rd. Just a couple of years ago, taking a kid who was 70th or 80th would have been the top guy in your class.
Well,
Now
even
you're talking
Shaw
about
was the
62nd guy in the composite.
Yeah, like he was the best recruit since Tillman.
Right. So you've now amassed enough high school talent that you can say we don't need to do that. We need veterans who are going to come in and give us steady production, proven production, or we're going to Jalen Harrelson wants to come here, we'll take him. That's where I think they're going to be coming into fall. It's either proven production or we're going to take a dude who's a top 15, no doubt about it, 5-star guy. I think that's kind of where they are.
Yeah, so that'd be, essentially that, they feel good about obviously Rowe, where they're at with Rowe and Nicholas Randall. So you have your 2-man class. Randall's kind of like a 4 or 5 hybrid-y, post. And
I like Randall a lot.
I do too. So I think, it's like you were saying, if you can add an elite talent on top of that, you do it. If you strike out, at least you're striking out on a guy, that you weren't really counting on. I think it's not all that dissimilar of a situation from like Quaintance, where they were kind of chasing Quaintance. It was always going to be a long road. It was always going to be a tough haul. Him ended up going to Arizona State was a little weird, but I think there's opportunities to for Mizzou to kind of stick in this, and if they can pull it off, then I mean, you got to feel pretty good. I mean, I think that's kind of the end of it.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think the board's pretty modest. I there have been some fans who have asked on social platforms, what's going on this cycle. They aren't taking 5 dudes.
Yeah.
And when you're not taking 5 guys, I'll say this: Missouri's hit rate on visits is like 40 or 50%. So if you need a 5-man class, you're looking at, minimum 10 official visits to get there. Missouri, I think, was up around 15 last year. If you're taking a 2-man class, you probably don't need more than 4, 5, or 6. I don't think it's a question here of effort. I don't think it's a question even of intensity or anything else like that. I just think it's scale. They don't need 5 guys. They maybe only need 2. So as a result, you're only gonna, bring in the guys that are going to fit what you want there. And Nicholas Randall was here in June, and some people might say, well, why isn't he committed yet? Well, Nicholas Randall hasn't taken visits anywhere else. He's taken visits to Mizzou. So if he starts lining up 4 or 5 other visits elsewhere, then I think maybe you go, all right, maybe that's gone. But right now, Randall's visited Mizzou, and you feel good about where you stand there. So we'll see. But a 2-man class with 2 top 100 guys joining 9 other top 150 guys. These are champagne problems, given what the last decade in recruiting has looked like. I'm not gonna, be like, oh, what's happened? And some people would say, well, what affected the 0-19 season have? If they land Jalen Harrelson, Aaron Rowe, and Nick Randall coming off an 0-19 season in the SEC. They landed at number 13, number 12 overall recruiting class coming off a bagel in the SEC. If they add this class to it in the best case scenario, you're really just looking for nits to pick at this point.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't think anyone can reasonably complain right now, given what the structure is. So we'll see. We'll see what transpires. But still 3 months till signing day.
Correct. So that's all we've got. Subscribe to Rock M Plus. If you are listening to this podcast and not watching on YouTube, but just listening and you're not subscribed, please subscribe through all your podcast apps. Did you know, Matt, that if you're a Rock M Plus subscriber, we have a feed for Rock M subscribers that is ad-free. So if you're like me and you don't like ads, you can get all your podcasts ad-free.
If you don't want to hear Dan Keegan at all,
that's a sponsored ad for our own service. That was more Dan barging into our podcast than anything else. So yeah, if we're going to talk about services that we provide you at Rock M Plus, you might have to put up with those, but you will not have to listen to whatever ads are thrown in there from our Fans First Sports Network feed. So yeah, just throwing it out there. We're going to take some time off. Football season is ramping up. Nate and Nathan are going to go weekly. Chad should be coming back soon with more content, and we're lining up some other pods. I think Quentin arrives in Columbia tomorrow. He's going to start covering fall camp. We'll probably hear from him, and so I'm guessing it's probably going to be a little quiet on the basketball front for a little while. Our next podcast, yeah, we're going to knock on wood and kind of hope. But our next podcast, barring anything crazy happening, will probably be at least 3 weeks away.
Okay.
So we're gonna skip our next cycle for the off season. And it might even be 4 weeks. Just need to take some time to recharge. Got to get this magazine thing all sorted out. Make sure that people are happy with the Rock M Plus service and all the upgrades that we're doing to the site, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to keep busy, Matt. You can just not record podcasts, but I'm going to have plenty to do. So we'll be back here in a few weeks. It'll be season 8. Unbelievable that we've been doing this that long. Season 8 of Dive Cuts coming soon. So until then, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. And